Hello and welcome to a presentation of all the new features of VCarve Desktop version 9.5. Before we move on to individual demonstrations, let's take a summary look at the features that have been added. As you can see, VCarve Desktop contains the majority of new features that have been developed for version 9.5, broadly grouped into key areas such as infrastructure, job type, drawing, modeling and machining. And we have a good spread of features that have been added to all these key areas, whether that be the automatic download and entering of your license code to get your software working, the addition of Rotary, which has previously not been possible with VCarve Desktop, some significant improvements to text creation and editing within drawing, as well as the new picture editor and the ability to crop bitmaps to vectors, some improvements to the way we import Rotary models, once again previously not possible with VCarve Desktop, and the ability to export the Rotary model as a wrapped entity. Some significant improvements to the way we handle Rotary based toolpaths, as well as the support for helical ramps. As part of our expansion of cloud-based services, we've introduced the ability to automatically download and enter your registered username and license code in order to get your software working. Now, previously with version 9.5, at worst you'd have to manually type in that registered username and license code, or at best be able to copy and paste that from an email you may have received. However, with version 9.5, when connected to your customer account V&Co, the license can be automatically downloaded in order to get your software working. If you don't have internet connection, you can still use the manual typed option. So with that, let's start a session of the software. And immediately you'll get this message, as this is the first time we started it. Do I want to enter my details through online or manual entry? So I'm going to go online. I'll then be prompted to log in to my V&Co account. This will direct to portal.vectric.com, your login page. I'm going to enter my email address and the password, which I created when I accepted the invitation to the account. And once I've directed in now, so that's validated that, I then will get the message pop up on the screen that the software has been licensed to Joe Bloggs Vectric, which is my registered username, and hit the finish button and my software starts. In version 9.5, we significantly improved the way we manage our clip art. In version 9, you'd have to install the clip art directly from the installation script contained on your USB stick, or alternatively each of the separate executables from your V&Co account. In both cases this would take considerable time and use up a lot of disk space. However, with version 9.5, if you don't install all the clip art, you'll still be presented with all that's available and you can download those items as and when required. If we look at some visual comparisons here, in version 9 you can see that you can install the clip art directly from the installation script on the USB stick, or alternatively each of the separate executables from your V&Co account. But once again, in both cases can take considerable time and considerable disk space. In version 9.5 you'll still be presented with all the available clip art and you can download it as and when required. So with that, let's show how that works. So I'm just going to start a session of the software now and a new file and go straight to my clip art and go down, for instance, to objects and people here, and I'm presented with the available clip art in this section. Some items have already been downloaded. You can see that because there is no download icon in the bottom right hand corner, whereas the ones below that bottle cap, you can see there is a download icon in the bottom right hand corner showing that it needs to be downloaded before it can be used. So with that now, I can right mouse key and go download. Okay, it will ask me to log in to my V&Co account. So I'm going to get the portal.vectric login page will come up, and I'm going to log in now with my email address and my password and sign in. Okay, that's linked across now. So with that, that item has now been downloaded and I can simply move that into the part space. Or alternatively now, if I've already connected, I can just simply paste that across and it will download and get pasted into the job at the same time. If I close the software now and restart it. So my connection is still there. So if I go now to start another part and introduce more clip art, for instance, I'm now going to add in these flowers. It won't prompt me. It would also automatically download and import because I'm already connected to my V&Co account. Version 9.5 represents a massive improvement for VCarve desktop users in the fact that Rotary functionality, previously only available at a VCarve Pro and Aspire level, has now migrated down to the VCarve desktop level. And not only is it migrated, but it's been completely rewritten to have a dedicated workflow within the main product rather than being a bolt-on gadget-based function. So in V9 there was absolutely no Rotary functionality in VCarve desktop, and it was a gadget only based function. Of course, we did not have access to gadgets in VCarve desktop. In version 9.5 this Rotary functionality has been added as a new dedicated workflow and no longer requires the need for gadgets. And because of this complete rewrite, it means that editing any jobs post creation becomes a lot easier. With the previous gadgets it was very difficult and fraught with problems, and there's some other further enhancements such as the ability to combine spiral and cylindrical layouts within the same job, but we'll take a look at that with a later demonstration. So now let's take a look really at how we would have managed the Rotary functionality from a gadget perspective, in terms of how that's changed now to the dedicated workflow we have in the core product. And once again, this wasn't even available at a VCarve desktop level in version 9, but this is how it would have been managed. Essentially, you do not have a Rotary based function on the job setup form. It was all through gadgets, so gadgets, wrapping and a wrapped job setup, which would have brought up this form you see here, in which case we have to specify the cylinder length, diameter, orientation, etc., whether we wanted a cylindrical wrap or a spiral wrap, and then once that's been okayed, it would then create a part, a job, where the values were worked out based upon unwrapping the cylinder, and therefore when you needed to edit that, it was very difficult to go back in and edit parameters because you needed to use some maths to get the right values. Whereas now in 9.5 there is a dedicated workflow. You can see here single-sided, double-sided and Rotary. As soon as you select Rotary, you have the dedicated parameters, the ability to enter the length and diameter, where the zero position is, whether that's on the top of the cylinder or on the central axis, the same XY data position we used to before, and whether the actual orientation of our rotary axis, whether we are going to be wrapping the Y around the X or wrapping the X around the Y. So as you can see, the gadget-based forms have been completely replaced by a new streamlined Rotary workflow. Also within a Rotary job setup, with the previous version 9 at a pro level, which like I say was gadget, you had the option to either have a simple cylindrical wrap or a spiral wrap depending upon the type of work being done, but not the ability to combine them both. Now with the complete rewrite for VCarve and Aspire, we can now have the ability to use both a spiral wrapped and cylindrical layout at the same time, which is of course is available to VCarve desktop users too. So essentially we have the ability to create a separate or a new level and to consider those items on that level to be wrapping. Okay, so we can see here a simple bit of clip art that now is wrapped across the bottom of this sort of lamp holder, and then above this centerpiece we then have a fluting design. So on the bottom we have a spiral layout, and at the top we have a simple cylindrical layout. Now for those of you that have never had access to Rotary, then obviously this will be completely new, but this is a big improvement really from existing gadget functionality that has now been added to the core product. As well as the new dedicated Rotary workflow, there's been huge improvements to the way Rotary items are displayed within the software. Previously, with the gadget-based functionality, you could not view the wrap relief for 2D jobs. You couldn't visualize the wrap toolpath simulation for 2D jobs, only the toolpath itself. Rather than it being a top toolbar icon for switching Rotary on and off, it was actually done through a toolpath drawing option. And when creating, for instance, Rotary text, the scene would actually be facing you, and the text, which happened to be in the center of the part, would be on the back face, making it very difficult to rotate and visualize. And you couldn't really see the model inside cylindrical stock. You could only see it in the flat stock, so it didn't represent a very realistic way of viewing the Rotary work. Whereas for version 9.5, you can view that wrap relief for 2D jobs. You can view the wrapped toolpath simulation, so you get a true exact representation of what's going to be happening on the machine. It automatically wraps the job when you go to create a toolpath. So when you look at the 3D view, you will instantly see a wrapped job. We've got new icons on the top toolbar for displaying the wrapped items on and off. When we create text in the center of the part and then calculate the toolpath, we instantly see the center of the model, the wrap model, facing us on the screen rather than the seam like we used to do with the old gadget-based functionality. And it's far easier to visualize the cylindrical stock in relation to the model. So we can see this is particularly important when we come to import models at a later stage, where we might want to see the model in situ against the cylindrical stock. So for VCarve Desktop 9.5 users, let's take a quick look at just how much of an improvement the new functionality is over the old way that used to be done through gadgets in VCarve Pro and Aspire. If we look on the left hand side here, when adding text, you would see the text in situ, but when wrapping, in the second image there, the actual cylinder wasn't wrapped, but the toolpath would be wrapped. Denoted by using the form here, toolpath drawing, wrapping the values around X, and therefore when you simulated, you saw the wrap toolpath not in situ with the actual simulation. Whereas in 9.5 it's really simple. You create the toolpath, you see it facing you immediately on the screen as the seam is on the other side, so it's showing the center of the part, and then when you simulate it, you see the toolpath directly in situ and a true wrapped toolpath simulation. So a big improvement over the old functionality, and this is the standard now for VCarve Desktop version 9.5. Okay, so I've started a new session of VCarve Desktop version 9.5. I'm going to go ahead and create a new file now. And we can see we have the addition of a new job type, single-sided, double-sided, and now Rotary. So when selecting Rotary, I have a dedicated set of parameters for Rotary-based work. I'm going to start by setting the job size up, so length 20 inches. The diameter of my stock is going to be 3. My Z0 position, I'm going to put off the central axis or the rotation axis. I've got my XY data position lower left hand corner. The orientation, now this depends on where your rotary axis is set up on your machine as to whether you are parallel to the x-axis and wrapping your y values, or parallel to your y-axis wrapping your x values. So in this case it's y-axis, and I'm going to OK that. Now, one thing that was really difficult to do with the way gadgets used to work in VCarve Pro and Aspire would be to modify those workpieces. But here with the new dedicated workflow, I can come back in now and actually increase my stock. I suddenly realized this is going to be made out of 5-inch. So we're going to go 5-inch, and my rotation axis on my machine is actually along the x-axis, wrapping the y values. So I'll OK that now, and I'm going to go straight ahead and create some text. So I'm going to come into the create text function and put in the letters Vectric. OK, and I'm just going to center that now in the middle of the workpiece, and then start to move towards machining that. So I've got my material set up there. I'm happy with those parameters and my clearance values. Going to go to the profile toolpath, We're just going to go down by a small distance of 0.1. I'm using a 1/4 inch ball. I'm going to machine on the vectors there and simply calculate that toolpath. So we'll calculate that now. We can see that is facing us because the center of the workpiece is facing us, whereas previously it used to be the seam. Okay, and we can go ahead straight away and simulate that. And as you can see there, we've got a very simple 5-inch rotary job with some simple text engraving. So it's extremely easy to set up and extremely easy to create the toolpath and then to visualize. And this is a huge game changer for VCarve Desktop version 9.5. Okay, so we're going to take a look at another example here, which is the simple wrapping of some clip art round a central cylinder. Okay, now I'm going to make reference obviously to how this used to be done in gadgets, but this is clearly extremely new to VCarve Desktop, and this represents a huge improvement over the way we used to do it with VCarve Pro and Aspire. So I'm going to open obviously VCarve Desktop here and create a new file. It's going to be a rotary based job, and this is going to be 20 and a diameter of 5, and it's going to be along the x-axis. So with that, I'm just going to OK. And what we want to do is, if we look back to the PowerPoint, is actually take some clip art and line it out and then wrap it round that central cylinder. Okay, so the first thing to do is to bring in the clip art. So we're going to go down into clip art now and simply select out. Now we've got some weaves here, and in particular I might want to, for instance, take this weave here. So I'm going to bring that across now. So that's going to download and bring into the part. So that's come in now. So what that's done is immediately evaluated based upon my 5-inch diameter. It knows that if I want to machine this, it needs to subtract basically the thickness of my clip art that I'm wrapping around from my stock. Okay, so essentially to ensure that we can machine it all within that stock, we need to modify our wrapping plane, our zero plane, onto which this clip art will be wrapped. So if I quickly just look at the 3D view there, you can immediately see that that has been wrapped onto the part. Okay, you can see that there. It's not in the correct position at the moment, but if we moved across to the machining and looked at it with the stock, we can clearly see the stock has been correctly set. So we've moved the zero plane in, so basically the central cylinder has slightly shrunk to accommodate the relief that's been added onto the outside, the clip art that's been added onto the outside. So anyway, we're a long way from getting this ready at the moment, so I'm going to go back to the 2D view. Okay, and now we're going to just expand this a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to rotate it around vertically. Okay, and just position it. And now we want to essentially extend that, because this is going to be wrapped multiple times round the actual part. So I'm just going to copy that clip art. So I'm going to use the Control key and simply just copy that out and add that into here, and then once again copy that up a bit further, and finally another one again. Okay, and maybe another one to finish with. So just basically added one onto the other to create a chain of the same clip art. Now with that, I'm just going to basically pick all those items there and ensure they're aligned correctly. So I'm going to go and just close out, go back to the drawing functions and just make sure they're all aligned correctly. Okay, so I've got that set now, and I'm going to group those all as one entity because I want to rotate them. So I'm simply going to group those objects. Okay, you can see them there in the modeling tree now. They show as being all the original parts grouped into a single group. Okay, and now I'm going to just rotate that now. So I'm just going to rotate that as it's going to be spiral wrapped around my workpiece. Okay, and we should be able to now. So this represents the flattened cylinder, and this clip art is going to be wrapped around it multiple times. Okay, so with that now, I'm going to just go to the 3D view, and you can see that it's been wrapped, but not fully all the way around, because we've not initiated that this is a spiral based wrap. So what I'm going to do is break out the clip art from the zero plane. So the zero plane represents what you see on the screen onto which the clip art is being added. So I'm going to create a new level, okay, and just add that and move it across. And then this level, I'm going to set everything on this level, wrap it round. So I'm going to set wrapping, and there we can immediately see that that clip art has been wrapped round. We can see that visualized, wrapped, and we can even see it unwrapped. Okay, let's go ahead and create a simple toolpath now. So from my toolpath tab, I'm going to set my material up. You can clearly see the cylindrical stock encompassing the model there. So we can see that we are going to be machining just a small amount of material away from our sort of zero plane up to the outside of the cylindrical stock. I'm happy with my clearance heights, and I'm going to proceed now to create a simple raster toolpath that's going to be running parallel to the x-axis across my part, using the model boundary and a simple 1/4 inch ball. So with that now, we've got the toolpath that is shown wrapped, and I can see that unwrapped if required, and actually zoom in and you can see that toolpath there. Okay, I'm going to go back to the wrapped layout now, and we're going to simulate that. So I'm going to preview that toolpath, and we can see that on the screen. And once again, that just shows a very simple example of how to create some cylindrical pillar there and wrap some clip art round to create a spiral pattern, and then a simple raster toolpath over the top to create the finished machined item. Another example that shows the capabilities of 9.5 VCarve desktop is the example you see on the screen here, which is a simple sort of lamp stand with a lower half that has wrapped relief and then an upper half that has some fluting separated by a central band. Now, if we look back to version 9, you had the option to either have a cylindrical wrap or a spiral wrap, but with version 9.5 you can combine this by having separated by levels, a level dedicated to a spiral wrap, whereas the rest would just be a standard cylindrical layout. So we're going to go back to our original example that we had and make some further modifications to this. So you can clearly see here that we've got two levels, one with our zero plane on and another one with all our weaves on. So we're going to have a look at the 2D view now, and we're going to make some modifications to this. Now, I need to put a dividing line halfway through my workpiece, so I'm simply going to come back to the drawing tab, add in a vector that's going to be in the central position and just basically up through the middle of my workpiece there. So my clip art, I'm going to make some changes here, and I'm going to need to rotate this. So essentially I need to make sure that it just is being wrapped into the left hand region, okay, the bottom half, the base half, and rotate that round. Okay, so I'm going to rotate that about like so, and then move it so there's a little bit of eyeballing here and a bit more rotation, and that's pretty good at that point. Now with that, you can see from the 3D view that that has changed that wrapping. Okay, so I might want to just maybe shift this a little bit more to the left, okay, and maybe add a bit more rotation. Okay, and you can see there that we've got this slight intermingling here, which has created this quite cool sort of wrapped layout where we've got it seamlessly wrapping around. We know it's going to be joining, but it entwines to create sort of a slightly random pattern. Okay, so we can see that there. So from that, I'm going to go back to the 2D view now and add in my base and the divider. Okay, so for that, I'm just going to go back to the modeling and add in a new level. So insert a new level, make sure that's active. Come back to my clip art now, and I'm going to use the 3D tabs and actually just one of these very simple pieces here. and I'm going to just rotate that using the function 9 on the keyboard by 180. Just expand that out like so. Change the height of that to be roughly around about 0.3. Okay, and just center that into the middle of the job, and then we can start to expand that directly out. I'm not worried about it extending off the bottom and the top. Okay, so with that in the 3D view now, you can see that. So actually I've set that way too high at the moment. We're going to go back to the modeling, and I'm going to set my level here to be combine mode merge. Okay, and then I need to reset it. Now when I expanded that, it changed the height, so I need to bring this back down to 0.3. Okay, so 0.3, and close that out. So we can see that quite nicely now is the dividing band there. Okay, and now I'm going to make a copy of that and shift that down to the bottom for the base. So I'm going to simply Control C and Control V, and then simply move that down here, and then hit 5 on the keyboard, 10 on the keyboard, and return, and that will move that to the bottom. So we can now see that in the 3D view here. So we've added that base. Okay, so I'm happy with that, and now we need to move on and add the fluting to the top. With VCarve Pro version 9.5, you still have access to gadgets, and therefore you have access to the fluting gadget for creating the vectors with the correct spacing for the fluting toolpath. However, in VCarve Desktop you don't have access to that, so please refer to the help notes, as they have a manual explanation of how to create the necessary spacing to create the required fluting toolpath. Anyway, for this I'm actually going to cheat and import the vectors. So I'm going to go back to my 2D view, File, Import Vectors, and read in the fluting EPS file, which you can see on the screen. And there is half spacing top and bottom, so when this is wrapped around you get an even spacing all the way around the cylinder. I'm going to select those vectors now and just come across to the 3D view and move across to the machining. So I'm going to just make sure that my material is set up correctly, and then go across to my fluting toolpath. And the start depth is not 0. Now if you remember the band here, the depth of that band was at 0.3, which is the sort of maximum bit of relief that's been added onto this model. So therefore my start depth, i.e. the height of this plane here, is actually at 0.3. So I'm just going to take that and change that to 0.3. We're going to go down by a further 0.3 inches. Okay, we're going to use a 1-inch ball nose here. We're going to ramp at the start and the end by 25%. So essentially it's going to come ramping in with a smooth ramp over 25% of the length of the vector, go flat along the main 50%, and then ramp out at the final 25%. So I'm just going to calculate that now. Okay, so we can see that there, and I'm going to preview those toolpaths. So we can see there is that fluting that's been added to the top. And now of course we need to create the toolpath for the lower half. Okay, so once again this is going to be fairly crude, so I'm just going to come back now and close out that form and come back to the 3D finishing, and I'm going to use the model boundary 1/4 inch ball and just go across the whole lot. So once again this could be more efficient, but just for the means of this demo. And then of course I'm just going to preview all those toolpaths together, and therefore we can see that lamp stand with the upper fluting and the lower sort of spiral clip art around it. So as you can see, it's a combination of the spiral layout and the cylindrical layout together to create sort of a simple lamp stand. Okay. Many people want to import models with Rotary. For instance, if you're doing a table leg, then you may want to model that and then bring that model in to unwrap it, maybe add some further clip art onto it before rewrapping and creating toolpaths. So model import is a highly used function when dealing with Rotary jobs. Now, previously with version 9, this was completely unavailable as a feature in VCarve Desktop, but for those people that were using Pro, then it was a particularly difficult import process in terms of being able to orientate it and view the model. So with version 9.5, this is being completely readdressed with a new model import function. So we're only displaying the relevant rotary based functions. You have the ability to import 3D and flat models, and we'll show an example later that uses a combination of both. A really cool, neat feature is the automatic initial orientation. You cannot always guarantee that the part will be orientated along your X or Y axis as you would like to machine it, but with the model import it will endeavor to bring that model in and align it along that axis. We also have a bounding cylinder that's wrapped around that model once it's imported that will help with orientation, and the ability to easily scale the model to fit the stock that you are using, which was very, very difficult with the previous gadget-based version of Rotary. We've got the ability to make sure that we can actually move the rotation axis. You'll see with the table leg that we use, because it's not a straight shape but actually got a curved leg, then having the rotation axis through the center of the model is particularly important to get correct. Okay, and of course we want to be able to display a fully wrapped result. Okay, so this is on the left hand side how we would have done it with VCarve Pro and Aspire in version 9, but of course this isn't available in VCarve Desktop version 9. On the right hand side is what you have is the new functionality that's been developed here, and we've got two different types of model import format, the 3D model and the flat model. So very easy orientation tools, and the ability at the bottom here, which is particularly important, to be able to scale the model to fit the stock, and then obviously to be able to resize the stock to the model. Okay, and I'll be using a combination of both in the demonstration. Okay, so I've started a new session of VCarve Desktop, and I'm going to go straight ahead and create a new job. Length 24, diameter 4, and the orientation along the y-axis, wrapping the x values. So with that, I'm now going to move to the modeling tab and to raise the new model import form. So I'm going to grab the table leg.stl, and you can see here that we're dealing with a full 3D model to start with rather than flat. And we can see the bounding box around my model and the red rotation axis. Now it's key that this happens to pass through the model, so I need to reposition that now before unwrapping, otherwise we'll get an inaccurate wrap. So with that, I'm going to move that rotation axis, just orientate the part so I can best see it now, and just move that down so it's contained within the model. Now immediately the bounding box round my model is re-evaluated, and I now want to look to really scale that bounding box to fit the stock. So I'm going to hit now scale model to fit material. So if I just zoom out now, you can immediately see the bounding box around my model and the stock, and I'm just going to actually resize the stock to remove the extra ends. We don't need those ends there. So with that, I'm going to OK that now. So immediately we see the wrapped model, the imported and wrapped model, and I can see the unwrapped version of that, which we can see here. And if I just rotate that round, you can clearly see that this is the top of the leg and the bottom of the leg. Now a key feature of Vectric products is the ability to add 3D relief clip art onto this to further enhance it before we go ahead and remachine it. So with that, I'm going to create a new level now. So I'm going to insert a new level, okay, make that active, and just have a look down on top of the job and come down and grab some clip art. So from the clip art now, we're going to go into plants and fruit, and I'm just going to grab, for instance, one of these, the sort of flower flourish that we see here. So pop that in. It's not in the correct size orientation, so let's rotate it around now. Okay, and I'm just going to move that across a little bit. Sort of happy with that there. And I now really want to mirror that across, so I'm going to come back to the drawing tab there. I have the item on the screen. I'm going to select mirror. I want to mirror around the job center, create mirrored copy, flip horizontal. Okay, so we can see those two there. Just close out that form now, and we'll check that that is being merged together. So we've got a nice effect there, and I now want to see that in a fully wrapped format, so I can go to the fully wrapped model, and there we can see our added relief onto the table leg. So we've done two things there. We've done a full 3D model unwrap, okay, and then further enhanced it by adding a clipper onto there. So we can then go ahead, of course, and remachine that. And if we go to our PowerPoint now, we can see from our PowerPoint, this is some grapes in a similar way that was added. But finally, you've got the table leg that you see on the screen there, which was the leg that we imported. Some further clip art was added to that, and then remachined to create the table that you see on the screen. So all this is capable with inside VCarve Desktop. Be aware that you can only import one STL file, so that was the table leg, and any further additional items have to be the clip art files supplied with the product or from the design and make site that were added to it. But as you can see, we've created a very enhanced table leg from initially a very plain imported model. For version 9.5, there are significant improvements to the way text is created and edited. If we look back to version 9, you would only ever see the text placed on the screen after completing the entries in the form. There was no dynamic modification, so if you're changing, for instance, the height or the justification, then you would need to apply that in order to see the effect on the screen. And also any transformations to the text would be reset when editing the text content. For instance, if you had rotated the text, scaled it, mirrored it, etc., and then wanted to make a change, those changes were all lost and the text was presented in its original location. Whereas for 9.5, when you start by clicking on the screen, which will show a text box showing its start position, its height and its alignment, and the text would begin to be displayed as soon as you enter the first character. So we can see also we have dynamic modification. If you're changing the font or the height, then that will immediately be updated on the screen without having to apply. And most importantly is any transformations to the text are maintained when editing the text content, and that applies when rotating the text, whether you've wrapped it along a curve, whether you've modified its kerning, also some non-proportional scaling or mirroring. That's all maintained if you go ahead and edit that text at a later point. Okay, so we've got the same part in version 9.5, and like we did with version 9, we'll take a look at some of the simple fundamental issues that we have and see whether these have been remedied with version 9.5. Now I'm going to go to the draw text function, and you can immediately see here it's given me a location for where that text is going to start, and wherever I click you can see that I've got a text box representing the text alignment, whether that's right, center or middle. You can see that's being changed dynamically on the screen there. And you've got the height, so if I change that to say 2, you can see that immediately being updated on the screen, and back down to say 1, and you can see that location being placed. So immediately after that, I don't have to come up to the text entry text box. I can simply start typing canoe, and we'll see the letters on the screen. Great. So now, as we did before, I'm going to just mid-flow, which is nice here, I'm going to click on that, scale that down now. Okay, I'm happy with that. And then add in ing to create canoeing, and as you can see, that kept that transformation. Now similarly, if I want to rotate that, what we had to do in version 9 was to come out of the text entry, because the transformation box there did not have the rotation anchors, but they are now here, so I can just rotate that and maybe come back in and type in kayak, and as you can see there, it's kept the transform, the rotation and the scaling. And similarly with the kerning, that would also be maintained. So you can see it's a big leap forward with the creation and editing of text, because typically we don't always get things right first time, or quite often we like to use templates for text where we then come in and just update the font or update the text entry, particularly if you're making plaques, for instance, where you might have sort of template text that's just edited to be different dates or different names. So I'm just going to delete that out now, and we're going to get rid of that text and come in and look at the sign here itself, and going to create the first word, which is rowing. So I'm going to just plonk that there. You can immediately see that that is the wrong height, so I'm going to change that to 1, and I'm going to add rowing into this location. And similarly, like we did before, I'm just going to shift and pick that outer curve and align to the center of that vector. Now that was simple here. Now we're going to add in the word Salisbury into this region here, as we did with version 9. So straight into the text, I'm just going to say create it down here, and going to type in SALSBURY and close out that form. Going to shift now and pick that out of vector, do the text on a curve, and we're going to align to the curve. We're going to be on the other side, and we need to apply an offset of 0.25. Okay, and we can now see that letters, but the spacing's not quite right, so I'm going to need to increase that up until that is right. Okay, I'm happy with that. Close that out. And just like I did with version 9, I've suddenly realized that I've spelt it incorrectly. So I'm going to come back in now to the text form and just change that L to an I, and that's kept the spacing, and it's just replaced the L with an I. So that is perfect. That saved me a hell of a lot of time. So I'm just going to close out that form. We'll switch on the other text the other side for association, and now I'm going to come up and create my 2 dates here. So simply come in with the text, place it somewhere around about here, and this is going to be 1934. Immediately I can see it's the wrong height, so I'm just going to change that to 0.8. Okay, and mid-flow I can actually click on it, rotate it, just get it into position. Okay, and just apply a bit more rotation. Okay, I'm happy with that now, and I'm going to copy that and paste it. So Control C, Control V, and just use the 9 on the keyboard to rotate. I'm going to move that now across to here. Okay, and just come back to the draw text function and change that to 2018. And as you can see, we've completed the sign in a much shorter time than we could have done with version 9, given the mistakes that we made along the way. 2 new image editing functions that have been added to version 9.5 are the ability to crop an image to a vector and to change its color characteristics. In version 9 there was no ability to crop an image, and also if we wanted to change the brightness, contrast or gamma, there was no way of doing that, and we would have to do that in a third-party software. This becomes particularly important if you're going to create, for instance, a lithophane, or if you're looking to create a suitable image for maybe creating a laser picture toolpath. So with 9.5 these have been added. So we have the ability to change the brightness, contrast and gamma, as well as obviously change it from color to grayscale, and to add a feathered border around it, whether that be rectangular or oval. And as stated before, this is ideal if you're looking to create a lithophane or looking to create a suitable output for a laser picture toolpath. So if we look at the visual differences between the two products, in version 9 you had nothing. There was no ability to crop an image or to change its color characteristics. In version 9.5, under the Edit Objects menu, there are 2 new functions here, one for cropping and one for the color change. So we can see here in this particular example, which we'll go through here, we've taken an image of a tiger and created a vector around its head, which is then cropped to create the trimmed out version. We've increased the brightness slightly since it's a dull image, changed it to grayscale, and then added a nice feathered border around the outside. And at that point, we're happy to move on to maybe using that for a different purpose. So with that, the best way to show this is to go into the software. So I'm going to open version 9.5 and just create a new file, just its width and height of 5, and I'm going to import an image directly into this space. We've got a tiger here, similar to the one we saw in the PowerPoint, and I'm going to create a circle centered somewhere around about there and expanding out. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to close that now and then shift and pick the image, okay, and then use the crop bitmap, which is the new function in the edit objects menu, and that will crop the image to the selected vector. Now I want to then scale that up, so I'm going to change its size to be 4, and I'm going to center that using the centering tool here, and we have the cropped image of the tiger's head, centrally located, height and width 4. At that point, I do need to want to change some characteristics with the image. So next to the crop bitmap icon is the picture editor, which brings up the form on the left hand side. You can see I can change the contrast. I can change the brightness. And I can change the gamma. Okay, in this case I'm just going to slightly increase the brightness, and I'm going to increase the gamma, and at that point I now want to change it to a grayscale image, so I'm going to change it to grayscale. And given the fact that this is going to be used as a laser picture, so I'm going to just add a border around that, so a feathered edge border. So rather than getting a hard edge, it's a nice soft edge to the effect. In this case, I need an oval border, and of course I can change that depending on how much feathering I want. So with that, I am happy, and now I have edited my original color picture of the tiger, trimmed it to a vector, and applied some changes to its color characteristics, ready for another operation later down the line. With version 9.5, there's a significant improvement to the way we handle spiral ramp moves between toolpath profiles. Now, in version 9, helical ramps were output as a series of straight line moves. Essentially, the spiral ramp would be broken into a lot of straight line segments, which could create a very, very large G-code file. Whereas for 9.5, those ramps are honoured as arcs. So their output, the output is far smaller file, but it does require an updated post processor. Now the best way to demonstrate these differences is to output a very simple toolpath using the existing post processor and a new one that's been adapted for the outputting of arcs. So with that, I'm going to start version 9.5 and create a new file 5x5 and simply add a simple circle which will be centered on the job, and go straight through to machining. So the material setup very simple, just thickness 0.2, and we've got our clearance heights correct. Moving straight through to the profile toolpath, starting at 0, cut depth 0.1 with a 1/4 inch end mill. Importantly, we're going to switch on the ramps to the toolpath, and I'm going to go for the spiral option and simply calculate. So if we have a look from the side here, you can see the tool is gradually ramping down to the blue toolpath level. So you can see that very clear ramped move down to the toolpath profile. Now if we just simulate that very quickly so you can see that being cut. Okay, and now the next stage is for us to output that using the two different post processors. So let's close out of that form now and go to the Save Toolpath function, okay, and I'm just going now to select the standard G-code option. So we're just going to go into the, you can see here that we've got G-code arcs and G-code helical arcs. So I'm going to select the G-code arcs here now, and we've got the arcs in inch, and I'm going to save that. Okay, so we're going to save it onto the desktop, okay, and this is going to be called no arcs, and we'll save that. Okay, and then we're going to take the same toolpath, so I'm just going to change the post processors now and to use the helical arcs, and we'll save that and we'll put with arcs, and we'll just take a look at the difference between those two toolpaths. So they've now been saved. So I'm going to come across now and just look at the no arcs file, okay, and we'll just simply open that up into a notepad here, and we can simply see that we have an awful lot of entries into there for what is essentially a simple ramp down to a toolpath profile. So with that, I'm just going to close the no arcs one, and we'll look at the with arcs, and as you can see there, it's a far smaller file, correctly output with the arcs to produce a far smaller G-code file. Within machining, there's been some significant improvements in the way we manage rotary jobs. New for version 9.5 is support for G93, which means that the rotation speed will vary to maintain a constant feed rate. Therefore, you'll get a much better finish quality than you used to do with the no support for G93. Similarly, when outputting the file using a rotary post, you would be originally prompted in version 9 to enter the diameter of the cylinder and enter whether the zero position on the cylinder was the surface or the center. So you'd still have to add that rather than that being automatically extracted. Well, that's changed for version 9.5, and those parameters are extracted from the job and written into the header of the G-code file. So with that, let's take a look. So I've got a session of VCarve desktop started here, and I'm going to open an existing model. It's one that we saw earlier. So I'm going to switch across to the simulation there. You can see the Vectric text that's going to be engraved, and if we just quickly simulate that, you can see that. So with that, I'm now going to output that using a rotary post. So I'm going to save that toolpath there, and here we're going to be using a wrapped post, which is wrapping the y-axis to the A, which is exactly what we want since this is aligned to the x-axis. So we're going to be wrapping the y values. So I'm going to save that toolpath now, and I'm going to simply call that y to A, so y to A, and we'll save that onto the desktop. And then I'm just going to pop open that text file now, and we can see at the top is specified the length. We've also got the radius and of course the diameter there. So you can see that those values have all been entered into the top of the header for the G-code file automatically rather than the manual entry of V9. So for VCarve desktop users, it's a much more simple process to what people have been used to with VCarve Pro and Aspire in the past. Okay, so let's summarize all the improvements that we've seen in VCarve desktop version 9.5. Right the way through from the infrastructure changes, which allowed the automatic download and entering of the license code. We've seen how we can work much better with clip art. The massive change, which is the new rotary job type, which has been added to this version. We've seen some improvements on the text editing and creation, as well as the picture editor and the ability to crop bitmaps to a vector. Vast improvements to the model import to allow for easier import of rotary based models, and the ability to export models as a fully wrapped entity. Within machining, we saw the support for helical ramps, which creates a much smaller G-code file, as we now truly support arcs, and we've got the support for G93 to give better finishes for rotary jobs and the easier post-processing for rotary files. So as you can see, a very complete set of improvements that have been added to the 9.5 release of VCarve Desktop.